Welcome to the webinar. We've been asked to do this by request, actually. So we're a company that specialises in relatively large productivity, transformational change and business improvements. It's been going for 20 odd years, and this is an opportunity to share some of those experiences. And the core of the hour is that we work from 10 principles. So we work for a variety of clients, but always we use these 10 principles as a form of a checklist, either during the design of a program or during the implementation, and certainly coaching and cajoling the client set, if you like, to do the right things. So it's based on those 10 principles. There are 5 objectives or 5 takeaways that we're aiming to achieve. One is to explain what we say when we talk about programs not meeting their full potential. And when a program doesn't meet its full potential, there are usually telltale signs, symptoms, things that certainly if we take our case, when we're asked by a client to go in and look at an existing program, there are little telltale signs that we see, and they may be helpful for you as well in your various approaches. The third one is the 10 principles itself. So I'll be spending a couple of 3 minutes on each of those 10. Obviously, they can be expanded upon, and that's the purpose of the ebook. So sign up, get the ebook, and that's a much more comprehensive booklet that expands on the 10 principles. And then the other takeaway is you're quite welcome to have a 30-minute informal video conference, telephone call with either myself or one of the team here at New Leaf to expand on your personal experiences or challenges that you may have. So they're the 5 things that we're aiming to do. And a little bit about me. There's a number on the call that know me. There are some that don't. So very quickly, you know my name, so I won't bore you with that. I started the company over 20 years ago. Left Procter & Gamble, great company, learned so much. I went actually as an electrical engineer and then went into general management and realized there was so much to learn about those things. And I carried on doing that. And academically, I also learned about systems thinking as a subject matter itself. And that over time has amalgamated into everything and every approach that New Leaf uses. Obviously, we've got consultants that put their own spin on things, but there's a core philosophy within New Leaf, which is based on that early experience. Our own IP, I think, and you could say unique, but there'd be somebody that says, well, we've got something similar. But one thing that we do, which we don't see much of, is integrating lots of things. And I think that comes from the systems thinking approach. Certainly my experiences in Procter & Gamble as a manager. I also, for the last 4 years, was what they called integrated internal consultant and worked on a program that was simple, but a bit of genius, I think, which was called Integrated Work Systems. And it was born from experiences, I'm going back a long time here, of course, but experiences of trying to put TPM and the equivalent Lean and Six Sigma type programs in place, but them never working as well as they should have done. So we revamped the complete thinking of it and called it Integrated Work Systems, which the clever bit was you could put anything in it. In terms of style, the old company, including myself, very practical, hands-on. So today, I suppose, by default, the style of this webinar is going to be, as I say, very practical and hands-on. It's not really meant to be an academic experience. So I think one of the first things to do is to just define what we mean by a substantial change program. But having said that, the philosophy principle, the 10 principles will fit a smaller improvement program within a large organization, a smaller organization. But as you saw by the logos, we predominantly work for large organizations. And instead of just thinking, well, I think I might know this. So before the webinar, I did a little bit of research. I went to the dictionary, and this is what the dictionary told me. And it was interesting because this is something similar to what we would say is a substantial program. And the thing about this definition is it also talks about culture. It also talks about work processes, and it talks about performance. And I thought that was quite telling, because we can go about a large improvement program and we think about only perhaps one of those things. So we might only think that it's about improving results. But over the course of the 10 principles this afternoon, I'm hoping you see that we realize, and I guess a lot of you will as well, but it's a lot about the work processes in the business that actually drive the performance. And of course, that's driven by the type of culture as well. So when we carry on and talk this afternoon, then predominantly we're talking about a program that encapsulates those three areas of a business. The next slide, I just want to, I'm a keen drawer, by the way. I don't know if it's part of the practical implementer in me, but I do like to see things in pictures. So in a graph form, just want to sketch up some examples of what I would consider to be an example of a program not reaching its full potential. So obviously we've got a graph, time over whatever outputs we're trying to achieve, might be financial ones, might be percentage increases, decreases in something, might be about OEE improvement, might be about response time in call centers. Whatever it is, we've got a target to reach, and we've got a time to implement a program. Well, the first line that I want to put on here is a totally unrealistic one, is that I think some people embark on a change program and think it's going to be like that over a relatively short amount of time, and we're going to achieve the results relatively quickly. All of the results that we ever target, we set as goals, we're going to achieve them. Unfortunately, when you go back to this and we talk about culture and we talk about work processes, a lot of other elements get in the way to prevent that sort of dramatic increase. So if you're in manufacturing and you're implementing a machine, then realistically you could take that journey because it has a minimum amount of people. But if you're doing a transformational program, the other dynamic, there's two more dynamics I want to draw on here. One is that you start, but it only ever slowly increases performance over time and goes on off the page into the other room.
Okay.
And we do, if I can draw it straight, we do get an increase in performance. And it's not a complete negative, but we're in danger of celebrating something that could be much greater because the dynamic of that is too slow. Another form of a potential not reached in a program is starts well, kicks off well, and then drops. So that as the energy, the resource, the infrastructure to drive a significant change where we start to see results achieved effectively, but over time again, it drops and it never reaches the potential that it could. So there are 3 examples there. One, the first one, is just totally unrealistic. The second one has a number of the symptoms I'm going to talk about. And the third one has a number of the symptoms. And one of the consequences of this, and I'll talk about it in more detail when I get to the principles, one of the consequences is that learning isn't taken into other parts of the business and forced to accelerate the implementation of good practice. Here, it's a different reason. There's little focus on sustainability after a good implementation phase. So unfortunately, really good implementation doesn't always mean that it sticks. So that's 3 types of potential not reached. So let me just go and have a quick poll. So there's quite a few of you on the call. So what I'd like to know as I pitch the different elements of the webinar is what your involvement is currently. Are you a leader? Are you a facilitator of change? Are you currently a participant? So we've got a poll up. So as you see the questions, there's just 2 questions. Let me just have a look at I'll just give it a, it's taking shape. Okay, it's still taking a little bit of shape. So we won't take too long over this now. Okay, but I'll just share the results. So if you see the results now, you'll see that in amongst the group, not 50-50, but there's a good split between people leading change, facilitating change. There's a few of you as participants. Now, the definition there, I think, is you are involved, but you're not actually responsible for it, and you're not providing the support in terms of tools, techniques, and coaching. And you're suggesting, or 73% are suggesting that your program could be somewhat better. And I think that's a really good example of what we see. We're certainly not saying that improvement programs aren't working. What we're saying is we're missing that we've seen examples of missing tricks and not using some of the principles that we find helpful will help us with those tricks. Okay, so I'll stop sharing. Any questions on that, put it in the Q&A, as Francesca mentioned, and we will take that away. Okay, so thanks for that. So we are looking for making these improvement programs work more effectively. So let me now just look at these symptoms. Okay, so sometimes we call these pain points, but when a program isn't working to its full potential, whether you're trying to gain an increase in various different results, a cultural change, whatever it is, we usually see these things. So I won't dwell on these because I'll expand on them when we go into the principles. But I don't know if you will be seeing any of these things in your current experiences or in the past even. So sometimes we go in and there are programs that are very complex. They're designed, months are taken. I can remember that there's a guy that was working with me on this call, actually. We went to one client and the business improvement manager was called into the meeting to explain the program. And he came with what looked like a roll of wallpaper under his arm. And he rolled the thing out across a long table and he said, this is designed for an improvement program. And of course, he understood it well, but to try and get that engagement with the rest of the workforce in something that he understood but was very complex, and it was complex, it it prevents doing good practice. It gets in the way. And as I said on the early graph there, my scribbles, that green line, that number 1 line, is the line that logical implementation of hardware, a new building, building a call center, building or putting factory equipment in, you can follow that green line, but you can't do it when it involves changing people's work systems, changing their behavior, etc., which we will go into. There seems to be a lack of understanding of OD, or organizational behaviors. So we think if we have a good program, it's well laid out, it's very logical, we underestimate how human forces can take us off track. There's another one, and you may have experienced this, I know a lot of people tell me this, is we have in businesses, we have very good managers, but sometimes the senior managers forget that they need to inspire people and be visible. So often we see that as one of the symptoms where a program isn't as effective as it is, there isn't that element in it. The politics and the cultural elements, past history of other programs, those sort of things need to be taken into account when looking at a program or designing a new program. One of the things to take into account here is endless fads are something that prevents issues, creates issues. The other thing is, as well, is that an assessment of the softer side of an organization needs to be taken into account as well. A program design is too rigid. So a bit like the green line here, you can imagine a train on the tracks. You know, you can carry on. If something gets in the way on the track, you remove it. That's the mentality. But on this curved approach, you have to be prepared to take a diversion. It's more of a ship on the ocean than it is a train on the tracks, where tidal concerns will come in, storms around Cape Horn or whatever. We have to steer in other directions. So it's definitely not a straight line. So you often see programs that are too rigid. There's a lot of new tools and techniques to be put into a program, but what we see is that they're done thinking in the old way as people always did in the past. And of course, these symptoms are all overlapping and they integrate with each other. But again, we try and do new things with new tools, but we manage them in the old way. Again, it links back to that green line somewhat, is that program milestones are pushed too hard within financial budgets, and people try to do things in a financial year when there's a dynamic, which I'll talk about is one of the 10 principles, that it will never be quicker than you can make people change the way that they do things. There's another element, a symptom that we see, is that when we talk to the employees, they say, well, we've got a great program, but we're sort of told what to do, but we don't understand why we have to do it. And we have to do so many other things as well that, we have to take priorities. So people are told what they need to do in the program, and then it doesn't stick. They say yes, but for some reason, they just don't do much of it. Another symptom that we see is that negative connotations are associated with resisting doing something, whereas actually the people who are resisting can give us good input into why things may not be going as well as they should go. And instead of embracing it, we run programs and we really encourage issues to come out. So what we say is, it's not the program that's causing the issues are there in the business. So when something occurs while you're implementing step-by-step approaches with your program and things aren't going so well, it's because there's an issue in the business, and those issues, they should be embraced. And then another symptom is that you see it's either all from the top or it's all from the bottom. And of course, a good program should have elements of everybody involved in it. So these aren't the 10 principles. These are the symptoms that we talk about in New Leaf when we look at a client's program before we get involved in it. So I hope that you recognize some of these things and they ring a bell. I wrote these before the webinar. We've got different variations, and I thought, well, I better make sure I know what I'm talking about. So I then did a little bit of research, and I found that these exact thing, maybe using slightly different words, but these exact symptoms were also being logged by Harvard University in some of their studies, other large consultancies in their studies. So I found that it wasn't just us that saw these things, so they must be quite common. So here now are these 10 principles. And as I said, we use these on a regular basis, and I'm going to touch on each of these 10. And although they're in two linear lists, again, in the systems thinking mentality, they intertwine and overlap. And on any one given day, we're either using these when we talk about the design of a program, we're using them to problem solve within an existing program, and at a more day-to-day local level, we're using them just to consider how we can coach the client set, as it were, in improving their programs. So we use these for all sorts of different reasons, but they're ultimately a checklist that we use almost every day. So I'm going to do my drawing again on each of these 10. So the first one is to use a step-by-step three-phased approach. So linked in with that first drawing, the curve that should occur in a well-planned and executed if those are meant to be straight lines. So in a well-designed program, that journey from current performance to the desired performance and beyond should take that shape. And that's the shape that we should have in our mind as we plan the various different elements to it. And I've divided that journey into three. So these are the three sort of fundamental steps that must happen. And again, we use this principle looking at a multi-site, multi-country size business, and we will look at this 3 steps if we're looking at a relatively small improvement change program in one location. So the first step is to have a pilot phase, and that's critical. The next one is rollout, and the third one is sustainability and continuous improvement. And I have a term called the faffing around time, and of course it's a bit unprofessional, but I can't get that out of my mind. When you start a program, there is a period where people don't get it, they don't understand it. There's a style that's needed to get us through that period. And then once we're through that period, things start to pick up. And once those things have started to pick up, there's a line between the pilot phase and the rollout phase, which is where all the key learning from the pilot phase is captured. So that's a very important element to it. And instead of going gung-ho right across the business, there's a breakdown of certain elements of the business. So there's an improvement program in the pilot phase. Sometimes there may be 2 improvement programs in the pilot phase. But when you get to rollout, you take all the learning from that time in pilot and you reapply it. So you're reapplying the programs faster, and it's the speed of being able to replicate the programs that you've learned from. So you've taken the learning and then you can replicate in parallel. You can run a number of programs over that period of time, and that's where that increase comes. So if you go back to the early drawing that I did at the beginning of the webinar, you saw that one of the examples, I think it's number 2, is that you get a shape like that, but it does have the ability to drop off. So the third phase is absolutely critical as well. And that isn't that that's been done so well, we're automatically going to have continuous improvement. We're automatically going to get everything stay where it is. There are, just happens to be 10, sustainability systems. And these are in the ebook, by the way. So there's actually a period going from rollout to sustainability that captures the 10 sustainability processes and starts to implement them as systems in the business owned by internal employees, system owners, and those system owners own those various different systems. And those systems aren't a revolutionary thing. They're things like refresher training, onboarding training, a process for senior managers to be visible, appraisal systems, including the continuous improvement type work. There's 10 of those, and they're absolutely critical in this 3-phase, step-by-step approach. And although I know even our own clients would say, well, I want that as short as I can. I want the time to be as short as I can. There has to be a period, 6 months plus, where the pilot is so valuable to be able to take that learning. So you get that step change in improvements, and those improvements can be tangible, cultural, and the upskilling of people. So in our programs, we always aim for those 3 outputs, not just the results, the upskilling of people. And I'll talk about that on another principle. So that's one of our principles. These aren't in any particular order, but we always make sure, even if it's a relatively small organization or part of a bigger one, still pilot, then roll out and sustain. And of course, like every principle, you need to take the intent of it and not the actual sort of binary meaning of it. So that change curve, you know, a large organization can have 10 or 15 of those change curves, as well as a more hierarchical top level strategic change curve for the company. So there isn't one change curve, there's a whole morass of change curves in various different parts, depending on where they are on that journey in time. Okay, so that's one of the principles. Another one of the principles is involve people at all levels. And we use this very simple definition of people in an organization. And I know it's more complex than this, but it allows us to keep simple thinking involved. So we have senior managers, we call those the greens. No offense to all the senior managers with us. There are middle managers, first line managers, the second line managers, we call them the reds. And then there's the workforce, which we call the blues. They are all of equal importance in our world. And the way that we do it, and you will find your own ways, and you may already do it very well, but as part of an improvement program, we make sure that there's projects. And in those projects, we try and get, well, we do get 2 managers at a various level within the middle management group, with 4 other team members in their workforce, with a well-structured, chartered project with a project sponsor in that team, not full-time. And at that level then, we've clearly defined the roles of those 2, the roles of the team members, and we can engage with the most senior managers as sponsors for those various different projects. And just going back to this, I know it's a bit of a sketch in a shambles, but inside these improvement programs, we have projects, and those projects, we deliberately encourage the clients to resource in that manner. And that is a good way of engaging with the workforce. And of course, they have to, I mean, that guy there might be quite resistant, and they have to manage that, and they might have to get support from the senior manager. But that's part of the process. If you remember what I said earlier, is issues in a business should be seen as positive things. They shouldn't be seen as negatives. So during the course of implementing the project, and we also run workshops to train people to work like this, in amongst all of that, issues are something that we encourage. So there's the 3 levels of the business that, as well as delivering the project, can address the issues that come up as well. And we really encourage, and I'm smiling as I say it because we really don't want it to happen. We make sure that people in the business don't avoid those issues. You know, they should address those issues head on. Then you're in a transformational change mentality because you're addressing the cultural elements as well. The other point is some people, and I've heard it a lot, but I've heard it less. People say, oh, people don't like change, but actually that's not true. 1/3 of people like change. 1/3 of people don't really know. They're looking for the direction to go in. 1/3 of the people really don't like change. Now, I'm not aligning that with this triangle, that's separate. But in a group of people, the dynamic, the human behavioral element is there are people that generally like change. They're always decorating their house, they're running the darts team, they're changing something, they go on holiday to different places every year. They like change. These people are going, well, I'm looking for the direction to go in. These people are going, well, over my dead body, wasn't like this before. We did it a lot easier years ago. What we've got to be careful is that the third, as I'll call them, we've got to make sure that these people don't govern our thoughts when trying to ensure that the implementation of the program is effective. These people will go with these people if we nurture these. So, hey presto, all of a sudden, we've got 2/3. And I think the one watch out there is don't ignore these, because as I said on one of those symptoms, if they are resistant, they may not communicate that resistance in a management speak way. They're more inclined to, well, appear to be negative, but actually they're doing it because they can see something that's going to get in the way. So we need to listen to them. So they've got a voice, they've got a purpose, but what we can't do is oil the squeakiest wheel and spend all their time on there and not start the program. If we do that, we get the other line on that first graph, which is the one that never really takes off. It just has very small, piecemeal, incremented improvements. So that's another principle. This is one from Deming, so I really wish it was a New Leaf model, but it was Deming. And the concept of this is important, is because there's a line between the top 2 elements and behavior and results. So the model says the way you think drives the systems in the business. Okay, so they're work systems. Take you off. Those work systems will drive the behavior that you see, and that behavior will drive the results. So if we're asking for teams of people to do things differently, then ultimately they behave in a different way and we get the results, hopefully the results that we're aiming for. The concept of this theory, and it's one of our principles, is 95% of improvement comes from thinking differently and devising better, more constructed work systems, because the work systems drive the behavior, and driving the behavior improves the results. The problem is that 5% is maverick behavior, but 95% is this. Unfortunately, we see lots of examples where people want those results and they go to the teams, they go to the individuals and say, I want you to behave differently to get that result. And you get into a vicious circle that the management of some organizations that we've seen stay below that wiggly red line and try and manage improvement and increases in results or decreases in other results. They try and manage it by telling people to behave differently, and it doesn't work. What we've got to do is embrace the idea that work systems, and of course, work systems come in two ways. There's hard systems, documentation, checklists, problem-solving approaches, objectives and agendas for regular meetings. Those are the hard side of work systems, but there's the soft side of work systems as well. The undocumented, the unsaid. They are the behavioral traits of the organization. They're work systems as well. And our principle, it's Deming's, but it's one of our principles because we always look at opportunities in a business and say, we've got to think differently. We've got to get the managers thinking differently. We've got to get the key people thinking differently because they've got to change those to change that. And some of those work systems are those sort of things, I jokingly say, we don't know, we don't know. They're things that we don't know are actually systems until we explore it. So that's another one of our principles, used very, very often in coaching sessions, reminders for people on one of our client programs. This is another one that we use on a very regular basis. So when designing an improvement program, there are things in the visible world that obviously we need to make happen. They're tasks. So a program won't have any shape of curve on it all if things aren't done. So clearly that element above the wiggly line, seem to be drawing a lot of wiggly lines today, but above the wiggly line, then tasks need to be done. But what we find is that organizations, very successful ones, are very task orientated. So there can easily be a focus on those business improvements. But what we do is we go down into we put our frogman suit on and go into the world of systems thinking, because systems thinking, so there's systems that are tools and techniques. So there's methodologies, various, Six Sigma type tools, lean type tools, the old TPM stuff, world-class things. There's hybrids of all those things. They've all got great tools and techniques in. And a program will need to implement those to make those tasks work to the advantage of the improvement program. And of course, all those tasks, they need to be done by people. So we need to give people those tools and techniques. There's another element of systems. All these things link up, of course. There's another element of systems, which is the ones inside the organization's capability, teams' capability, departments' capabilities, individual capabilities. If you go to Covey, he will say knowledge, skill, and attitude. Not knowledge. We have a saying in the business, knowing isn't doing, okay? So this is where the doing is, but also skills, which I've just illustrated there, knowledge, skill, and attitude, having the right mentality to go about it, having the right team spirit, all those things are inputs into doing those tasks. And as a principle, what we do is we join those two together, and this is that integrated approach that I talked about at the very beginning. That integrated approach, we join it up seamlessly, and it's almost like we've got a set of scales. See, I draw a lot, but I didn't say I was any good at drawing. Okay, so we have like a set of scales, and what we're very conscious of is trying to get the balance between introducing a tool, building the capability, introducing a tool, building the capability. If you don't do that, this goes out of balance. It's all tools without the right skills to use them, or it's everybody trying to work well without the tools. Now, I know that's extreme, but in reality, it's a blend of those things that we see. And often this set of tools lives in one part of the organization: operational management, business improvement experts, all those things, consultancies. We've got lots of tools that, don't get me wrong. And then this, building the capability, lives in another part of the organization: HR, learning and development. And what we try and do is blend the two together. And it's not that you get a lot of resistance, you get the opposite. You get people going, this all makes sense now. So when I'm learning about leadership, I need to be learning about leadership to run a project with a partner, with other people in the business, with a senior sponsor, and I need to use these tools that are associated with the program. So we're very conscious of always balancing developing people, developing teams, individuals, groups, departments. We usually take a cohort of about 10. In developing those people and developing them whilst simultaneously implementing the tools. And although that is, we're all common sense, and people, I'm sure people perhaps on the call might go, well, this is obvious, we do it. We find that very few people do it. And that's why there was a request for this webinar. So that's another principle. Another one is that we must have leaders leading by example. So the leaders must lead those behaviors. So when you think about work systems, behavior, results, we need the seniors to be banging the drum that that's important. So they need to not hide away in their office or be very busy working on strategic stuff. Of course, they need to do that, but also they need to go into the business, find time to walk into the workplace and support various different people with their projects and their improvements. And we have a thing called the 3 E's. They should be enabling people, they should be envisioning people, and they should be energizing people. So, motivation, praise, direction, goal setting, all these sort of things. Resource, maybe a little bit of money. We often find that money is not the key thing, by the way. A little bit of money, time is more the thing. Seniors freeing up people's time, saying this is more important than this. Yes, you're going to spend time on it. And of course, their style as well. So most of us will know the 4 classic styles of leadership: S1, directive; S2, teach and tell; S3, coaching; S4, delegation. They have to pick that right style for the right moment that the organization is on that journey with the curve. So it's not, I'm a one style fix all type. It's, we want that leadership to represent leadership through different styles during the journey of the program. So we spend time with the senior leaders as well in the program. And if you don't, I advise you that it's one of the things I think that prevents it. And of course, nobody does it on purpose. Facilitate outside the triangle. All right, so I've brought the triangle back in again, but what I'm doing this time is that an internal facilitator, so there's a fair percentage of you that you said this is your role in the business. Now you need to mentally, now I had some great training when I was at Proctor's, so I was in that integrated internal consultant team, a European team, and we got a lot of help from psychologists and everything else. And this was one of the tips. You're employed by the business, you're inside there somewhere, probably in that middle group of reds. Whilst you're facilitating, you might be the continuous improvement manager, the business improvement manager, whatever your role is, you're responsible for helping that organization, but you're not accountable for all of it. Okay, so you need to be able to mentally stand outside that triangle and work with this group of probably peers, right? And give them coaching, cajoling with their projects and everything else, tools and techniques, of course. But there's also an element as well, that time, and this is where this person needs to build their influencing skills, or they may already have them, but it's almost a 50-50 split between the time that person spends with the implementation of tools and techniques through other people, and the time they spend with the senior managers to make sure that the senior managers are giving the right direction down through the business, why it's important, what they expect from people. And that's two critical things. That's leadership that's required in any one of these substantial programs, and facilitation. One without the other takes a lot of the potential for the program away. Learning by doing, I won't spend much time on this. We all know this: plan, do, review, improve. So we all know this cycle. It's a classic. It's been around for an awful long time. We all know it, but not everybody embraces it in a change type program. And there's a difference between the planning is very tasky. Let's have a plan. Let's plan to put that in. Let's plan to do that improvement. And we end up and we go off and do it. The thing that we've got to remember to do is review and improve it so we can have a better plan. And I know this is really classic stuff, but it's one of our principles. I'm not apologizing for it actually being so simple. But the thing that this allows us to do is people then learn by doing. So instead of taking people out of the business, costing an awful lot of money, stopping the core center element or the manufacturing process or whatever it is that if we have a plan for people to have a go and we learn from the going, then we get better at doing it. And what we're doing is we're taking people then through the process of learning by doing, which is emotional learning, which is the strongest way of learning. So there's a bit of psychology here that we don't need to spend 6 months in a dark room trying to change people's minds and the way that they think, because we can do it through a process of continuous improvement through skills and the involvement of people learning for themselves. So that's how we use the plan, do, review, improve cycle. And I know that it comes from a different background to this. And I know that sometimes it can be seen as more of an engineering tool than anything, but that's why we use it as a principle. We use it for emotional learning. What we don't do is just get a lot of, doing done and not look at how we can learn from it. So that's one of our principles. There's another one here. So here's the classic iceberg. So the classic iceberg says there's lots of problems in the business. So these are visible problems in the business, and they're the ones that we can see, and they're the ones that stop us from whatever it is we're doing in our business. That's the thing that stops us from operating. So of course, naturally, we need to fix those things. We need to look at those things. We need a good problem-solving approach. We need good problem-solving tools as part of an improvement program, and we need to address them. The danger is, though, is understanding problems in a business is that if we chip away and make a really good job at removing those, like an iceberg, other problems in the business that are just under the surface will pop up. So at best, what we end up being is an operation that is good at constantly problem-solving problems. Whereas lower down, a small, relatively small, insignificant irritation for somebody down here, and they always work around it. Invoice number's never right, so I constantly correct it, or something really small like that. The bracket keeps falling off and I just get better at welding it on. The truth of it is, like an iceberg, that slowly creeps up and becomes a major issue and stops us from operating. So a program needs to address those things in projects, but also it needs to address these things in day-to-day, in the workplace type of activities. So that's another principle of ours. Are we addressing just these things, or are we stopping it at the root of everything? Because like an iceberg, these things will pop up. This is a bit similar, but this is the apple tree. And what we use this principle for is to ensure that we pitch a program with the tools and techniques and the capability side, we pitch it at the right level. So if I just draw a line here, obviously there's low-hanging fruit, so we know that. So apples on this tree are problems in the business. So there's middle ones, and then there's high ones. And obviously those high ones are to reach problems. And I think most of us will have come across this diagram before. Now, one of the scales that we consider when we're looking at this is this scale of efficiency. So I'm not talking about manufacturing. This could be anywhere. This could be a call center, service industries, many different types of organizations. How high efficiency do we really have from end to end? So in a manufacturing environment, it's much easier to see the end to end, which is raw materials coming in, processed to turn it into something. Let's say it's jars of jam. Jam gets filled into bottles. Bottles get tops put on. Bottles get labels put on. They go into a box. Those boxes go into a warehouse. Those boxes then go onto a lorry. You can physically see that process, and you can see how efficient it is. But there are other organizations where you can't visibly see that efficiency as well as you can in other organizations. So one of the early things is to plot out quick and dirty process of where people live within that process. We did this in call centers. You know, we made sure that everybody in the call center knew the overall process. And ironically, when you look at efficiency, how many calls did we really make versus our capacity? How many jars of jam did we make versus how many we could make? There's a lot of organizations which are around about the 50% mark. You know, they only ever achieve 50% of what they're aiming to do, especially when you can't see the process. So the problem with that is that if you pitch a program, so up here somewhere, if you design a program of improvement and you pitch it with the complexity, which is one of the symptoms, remember? So one of the symptoms of complexity is the program is really aimed around here. The ironic thing is, in many organizations where the workforce are spending half their time putting things correct, in a sense, you know, if you take it in a simplistic way, the problem is that there's apples, issues, not just on the tree, but there's things that people are walking around. And it's very, very difficult in a program of complexity that aims here to get the engagement of people who are living in the business who are struggling with these things every day. And that's why we need to address some of these. Obviously, that's where the results come from. But we also need to get rid of these irritations. And of course, that's linked in quite closely with the iceberg as well. The final, you'll be glad to know, the final 10th, although they're not in any order, is we must create a sense of urgency. And this came from a lot of behavioral science that I learned in that systems thinking academic world that I entered. Fantastic times, I have to say, is that we have to get people to do things differently through different work systems. So what I do for this is I just draw two simple washing lines, okay? Washing line posts. And if you have a big change intervention there, and then you have another change intervention there, the energy, morale, excitement, and involvement of people starts high because they're literally involved, and then it dips to business as usual. And then there's another intervention that, oh crikey, but we're doing another one of those improvement program elements. Hang on a minute, what have I got to do? So it then starts to build up again. And then there's a relatively high level of interest when the next intervention's on. The problem is that during that time that there's been no intervention, then that's business as usual. And going back to the very first curve that I drew, the one that really wobbles along the ground and never takes off, is because there's too much gap between the activities that we're wanting people to gain new habits. So we should do little things often. little things often, that's got to be part of the design. So if you do little things often, there's never the temptation for the energy, the interest, and the motivation to drop. So we've seen again where organizations do really big things, shut the operation down for a day, do lots of team improvements, do lots of things in the workplace, where actually a little bit every day or every other day would be very beneficial. So quite quickly, that's the 10 principles. There's much more in the ebook. I know I've been on Transmit because within an hour's webinar, that's the way it works. But we can now go to any questions that may exist. So I'll just go to the questions. I see there's 4 there. So I might have just a couple of minutes to answer these things. So I've got one here. From your experience, what is the key reason why change programs fail? Well, I can't say there's one, but in those examples, those symptoms, you will always see 1 or 2 of those. And primarily, without upsetting anybody, it's good leaders with good intentions will give the authority for a change program, but not actively get involved in it. And they underestimate the importance of being seen to be involved. So that's one of those reasons there. What are the most commonly missed steps? Well, there's obviously planning, but again, you can overplan. And I think one of the steps is really embracing that plan, do, review, improve. Then it encourages you to start. So that's Dave Matthews asking that question. And I think one of the other elements, whether it's a step or not, is review, review, review. And unfortunately, many organizations get into the habit of reviewing, looking at the numbers. But actually reviewing should be looking at the improvement program and looking at the behavioral change. Okay, so Thomas, sorry I need to leave. Thanks for the lecture, very valuable. Thank you. I'll be in touch with you individually. I'm happy to stay on. We are reaching a point now where I'm going to hand back over to Francesca to close out, but I will stay on the call for another half an hour. If anybody's there wanting to have a conversation about anything, I'm happy to stay on. So I'm going to close out the questions and go to Francesca, who will just close out for us.
Great, thank you, Martin. Really enjoyed that session, very valuable. Just to pick up on the points mentioned there, if you want to receive the ebook that goes along with this webinar, if you just either email myself, which I've dropped into the chat, my email address there, or obviously the one on screen there, and I'll make sure that a copy of the recording of the webinar and the ebook gets sent over to you. And as Martin mentioned in the outset, as part of this, you're entitled to an informal 30-minute VC if that would be of value to you. Again, just drop us an email to receive that. So thank you for your time, and yeah, that's it for today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll stop sharing. I'll take the slides down, and I'll wait for anybody that wants to stay on and have a chat. We can go off mute. We can reminisce. We can pick on any particular points. I know an hour is about the limit for a webinar, but you can't do some of these things justice. So hang on, if you will. Hello, you. Hand up. How are you?
Hello. Can you hear me, Martin?
I can. Yes. Nice to hear from you. How are you?
Yeah, it's nice to see you again. I just wanted to reminisce, as you put it. I think it's a great point you make with regards to resistance and opportunity. And it's connected with the change of thinking that's required as well, because when you do come across resistance, you need to understand that resistance to try and understand where the thinking is coming from. So it's almost like a bit of a causal loop there.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's good to hear that.
Yeah, and I think linked with that as well, you is I've worked with you in Lloyd's Bank, by the way. Great people as well, and everybody has a good opinion, and we should embrace that. So we shouldn't think I've got a set of tools and I've just got to get people to use these tools, because if you've got good people and they have concerns about anything, there's a good reason for it. Anything else, you?
No, that's it. No, I just wanted to raise that point.
Yeah.
It's great to see your sketches again as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm too old to change that, I think. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So, what role have you got now? Are you actively involved in implementing things?
Yeah. Currently, we're still working in what is known as transformation. It's probably moved on a bit since you were there.
Yeah.
Justin's still involved, and we're going down an agile route, basically.
Yeah.
Which
yeah,
might need to have a chat with you offline about that one, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm here for. Yeah.
Reserve judgment on that at the moment.
Yeah. There's always a barrier to break when you're a commercial consultancy. There's always when we talk to people on things like this, there's always a sort of unsaid elephant in the room that people think we're trying to get work, whereas we get work, right? And all we do is ever share it. So don't ever I mean, I'm only down the road. I mean, once lockdown opens, but I'm only down the road from you, really, in terms of driving. So we can always have a chat about things, and certainly on the phone. So we don't try and get ourselves into businesses. It just happens. So don't feel that if we're not currently with you that you can't talk to us. That's just nonsense. So we just love talking about this stuff. Yeah, that's great. Very good. A lot of other people are on mute. Anybody else want to say anything? David Ho, oh, here he is. Yeah.
Hello. I was just
for anybody that knows this ex-P&G guy, he will know what I'm saying.
I must admit, Martin, really lovely presentation. It was like swinging a lamp. It took me back to some entertaining times we had.
Yeah.
AWS program. Still going, as I understand it, in its
That's what I've understood as well. I mean, way past my involvement, of course. I've been gone for over 20 years, but no, and I learned so much. And I think what Procter & Gamble were able to do was they embraced people learning. It was almost an expectation that people had to learn. It was part of the process.
And your point about leadership is quite right. I think my understanding of things may have changed over time, but it is really driven by the people who drive a particular organization, making it that's the right way of doing things.
Yeah.
And quite often, as we've both seen in different aspects of businesses, short-termism really gets in the way when people are myopically focused on, I've got to get to X by Y, and not really taking the time to, as the Japanese would call it, get into the gemba, understanding what the work's about, which is, unless you understand the route to get somewhere, it's a cosmic leap. You can't have a cosmic leap. It'll never happen. So no, it's been.
And I don't know. You can't talk about your guys and your clients, I suppose, but you must see that although it's common sense, people still don't see it, do they? They still try and take a shortcut, or they try and do something different, or
I think the reality is we're all human, and I see more around things like ego get in the way, and it's not surprising. I mean, you just look at the world of politics or football or anything else. There's a whole logical approach, and then there's this funny human emotional stuff that quite often gets in the way, and change is often slowed down by the fact that you've got to navigate these things one way or another. And I like your model of engaging. It's kind of what we used to do, isn't it? People at all levels being engaged. Some people call it cellular manufacturing. The approach is consistent. But at the end of the day, if there are people who are in leadership positions who kind of think their ego is more important, you might be batting on the wrong wicket. And that's something we're always conscious of, right?
Yeah, and the only thing we found is that if we engage them in a small way, in that sponsorship role, for example, we can, if this doesn't sound a bit smoke and mirrors, we can work on them, we can help them, and it's encouraging people. If their organization is embarking on a change program, why should everybody in the business already know about it? So we should embrace the idea that we're all learning together. And those leaders, they get so much kudos from the workforce if they go into the workplace and start talking around, I don't know this, like you don't know it. Talk me through what you're doing. It's very engaging. But as you say, egos and history and experience gets in the way.
Yeah, and different nationalities, different cultures, different countries.
Exactly.
When we used to say sort of understanding cultural differences and behaving appropriately. Remember that was one of the HR lines, wasn't it?
That was definitely,
by golly, it's but yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, oh, very good. We've got Mario, we've got Martin on with their mute signs off. Were you waiting to say something, guys, or?
No.
Have you got a question or a point to make? No. We've had a good attendance from different parts of the world, and sometimes the Wi-Fi doesn't connect so well, so it may be a bit of a connection problem there. Okay, so if there's any more, I'm very happy to stay on. But apart from that, we're shut down and I'll get on with the rest of our day. I hope people have enjoyed it. I hope a lot of people take on the invite for the ebook, and certainly the invite for whatever the time span, a 30-minute chat. I don't mind how long it takes. But if that's everybody done, I'll close out. Anybody with any last points?
That's great. Thanks very much, Martin. All the best.
No, I enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you very much. All right, guys. From Alan, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. All right, I'll close out. Thank you. Bye.